Lights, camera, here we go. We're off and running. This is Jon Adams. Back in studio after a beautiful vacation with my lovely wife and Roger and Jackie Olson. We had a grand time in Mexico. And I'll tell you what, I think everybody should have to leave the country and go someplace else and see how other people live. Because I'll tell you what, when you go to a country that has less than we do and the people are working 12 hours a day and they make $16 a week, you really start to have an appreciation for where we live and the country that we have. But, you know, it seems like I haven't been here in a long time. I mean, the studio feels a little actually, you know what, James? I do remember the last time I here. It was quite the event. I had no continuity. I had no flow as I remember it. But I can tell you what, with the election of our new president, well, former president reelected, there's plenty to talk about. And for me, looking at all the executive orders that are coming down the pipe, we need to talk about this. You know, I'm hoping that we can have a logical discussion or discourse about what we see, okay? And when I was coaching, the one thing that I would tell my players when they would say, oh, I did this right and I did that right, and we had videotape and all that, and I would tell them, listen, the live eye in the sky doesn't lie, meaning that when I see something and it's not what it's supposed to be, and I tell you that, don't try to convince me that it's something else, okay? Don't try to convince me that I didn't see what I thought I saw. Don't try to explain it away like, oh, well, I meant to do this or that. Or, you know, with my sons, you ask them a question and sometimes they fudge the numbers or what they're saying and oh, well, that's not what I meant. Well, if you said it and it came out of your mouth, then I have to assume that's what you meant. Now, context, it matters the context of certain things, of course. Context, they say, is everything. But I'll tell you what, this past week, the context for me was first, I got to slow down in Mexico. I got to lay on the beach. I got to really just reset my body, reset my mind, and just get a hold of what's happening in the world today. So as you guys know, I work at Davies as a proctor, and I get to interact with wonderful young adults over there and staff. Shout out to Mr. Byers and the crew, TC, I should call him Mr. TC, or the Godfather, as I like to refer to him, tax-paying citizen, because the IRS has a very specific task. And the more that you have, the more that they can do their job, okay? And so who's going to bear the brunt of it? It certainly isn't big business, but it's the everyday citizen, small and medium business person. So I wasn't in favor of that. And the fact that President Trump has chosen to do something about it, I'm like, okay, all right, I get it. That's something that I get, but here's my problem. When my wife and I decided to go on a trip, the first thing we did is we planned it. We had a plan. We got together with our friends, and we executed it, okay? When I decided to start my window washing company, I had a plan, I had a business plan, I had all these things in place, and I executed it. And so as I go through these executive orders, I want people to think about this. Why isn't there a plan ahead of time? My biggest fear with everything that this guy wants to do is that there's no plan. Okay? We should be worried about that. Big Game James says we're up against a break. When we come back, we're going to go through some of these executive orders. I want to hear from you guys. Does it disturb you, some of these things that are coming out? Because it needs to be talked about, because we've got 4 years. And so we need to have accountability, just like we asked for accountability during the Biden administration. If you want to call in, the phone number 701-293-9000. Welcome back to the Talk Rock. Welcome back to Talk of the Town with Jon Adams. In the opening monologue, is it a monologue? I don't know. I was talking about, okay, we have a bunch of executive orders coming down. You know, we have one side that's all up in arms and woe is me and doom and gloom, and the other side is rejoicing that this guy is doing exactly what he said he's going to do when he gets in office. So, first thing I need people to do is understand that executive orders without funding are just that. They're just orders. They don't mean anything. A number of executive orders even through the Obama years, he passed a number of executive orders that on paper they were what they were, but they never got funded, so they never went anywhere. So I want people to understand that there's more to just saying this is what we want to do. So putting a voice to it doesn't make it so. But what makes it so if he has the Senate and the House of Representatives on board, now we're on to something, okay? So if the House and the Senate approve a bunch of this stuff, then guess what? It becomes reality. Now, from what I've seen of politicians is that they do whatever they can to save their political soul. In other words, they don't necessarily do what's great for their constituents. In the past 4 years, we've seen both sides of the aisles flip-flop back and forth to whatever they think would benefit them at the time. So, you know, I'm not real up in arms over all of this, okay? Because to me, I think that he can only go so far. But for his base, you're able to say, hey, he's doing exactly what he said he's going to do. Now, as this plays out, I'm in wait and see mode. Okay? I can't have the doom and gloom and the, oh, what is he doing now? It would drive you crazy if you watched every tweet. I mean, we had 4 years. We know what this guy is going to do. Why is everybody just continuing to have a reaction? But there are some things, specifically because I'm in the education field now, and his letting the states handle the education piece. Okay? To me, it's like maybe I don't know enough to really speak on it, but I can tell you this. When the states did control access to education, higher education was not an easy thing to come by if you were a minority or a woman, and certainly not an immigrant. Certainly not if you were poor. Okay? Let's remember that. There's a reason that we have these safeguards in place. So we've done away with DEI, all right? And it's funny because I don't think we ever had DEI. I don't think it was ever implemented in any meaningful way. So I find it hilarious that we're cutting it out. But I can tell you what is getting cut out is individual freedoms. Right now, as a woman, you don't have a choice in certain things that happen with you. Right? We know that. That's government interference. The government shouldn't have a right to decide those things. I mean, on the one hand, we say we don't want big government, but on the other hand, we're okay with them making decisions about women's bodies. Which is it? What do we want here? Now, it depends on what side of the fence you're on. Now, I want to point something out here. If it doesn't affect you, and this is what I found, your opinion is usually mild at best. Okay? Like I said, with the city commission, I really didn't pay too much attention to the city commission because it didn't really affect me. Just kept my head down and worked, but now being on the radio, having to report stuff and get it right, I have to pay attention to the city commission. Now what's happened is I'm like, holy cow, is really the way we're going to let our local government operate? And all of a sudden it's become very important to me that people be informed. Pay attention. Our local and state officials are using our money, okay? Your money, and then they're telling you how they're going to give it to you or take it away from you. That's not the way that works. But anyway, let's get back to this education piece. So we return this to the state. A couple key points. We have busing where we bus kids from one area to another so that everything remains equitable. So if it goes back to the state, does that mean that in the school system now, the kids go to the school that they're closest to? Do we end busing? You know, we're doing away with a lot of federal mandates. What happens to the HBCUs? For those of you guys who don't know, they're called historically black colleges. A lot of federal money tied up into that. So now if it goes back to the states and the states can do what they want, then the question becomes, what happens to that piece? We know how they were funded before the federal government stepped in. You know, are we going back to separate but equal? We know it was separate, but we also know it was never equal. So then what are we doing here? And like I said, if it doesn't affect you, it's very easy for you to be lukewarm about it. But, you know, for the kids that I see, this education piece is vital. Which plays along before let's not forget the school voucher thing. So my kids went to private school, right? I would love to be in favor of school vouchers, okay? School voucher thing is good, but what if you don't have the money to send your kid to private school to take advantage of the school voucher? Then the question becomes, well, who really benefits from that? Sounds to me like people that already have the money to do the job, you know? So my wife and I, we were able to send our kids to Oak Grove, and with school vouchers now, we're gonna save some money. Now, we saved money so we could do that. Okay, we knew that we wanted our kids to go to Oak Grove. We worked and we were able to do that. Okay? Will the school vouchers mean that people that traditionally couldn't afford to go to private school now, are those students going to be able to take advantage of those families? These are all things that we have to think about. Again, my original thought is, where are the plans? Saying you're going to do it is one thing, but actually implementing it in any meaningful way is what I want to know. And everybody should be asking that question. We're still waiting on his health care plan. This guy is great at dismantling. What has he built? Where's the legislation that was passed in his former administration? Feel free to call in, and I know that we've got the flag on the other side, and I know some of those flag listeners, you're chomping at the bit. Call in and just, let's have the discussion. As a guy who wants to know, explain to me how we're going to get all this done. I've chosen not to talk about the tax piece for one simple reason, okay? We know who's going to get the tax breaks in the next 4 years. We know. We only have to look at his last tax plan that's still in effect. People are all upset because their taxes were going up under Joe Biden, not realizing that the tax plan that was in place was implemented under Donald Trump. So James said that's enough pontificating. We need to pay the bills. So on the other end, I want people to call in and I want to hear what you have to say. If it's an attack, save it. If you're going to try to sway me, save it. I'm not going to try to sway you on anything. I just want us to have a dialogue. So call in. The phone number is 701-293-9000. Welcome back to Talking to Tom with Jon Adams. We're here. We're talking about the new administration. We're talking about some of the executive orders. What does this mean for us as a country? What does it mean for us locally, education, and talk about all of it. And I've invited callers to call in because we should have this discussion. And it should be civil, and it should be a back and forth, because we need to address these things. And James tells me that Beverly's calling in. Hi, Beverly. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. How are you?
I am doing fabulous. I was in Mexico for 8 days, so.
It's wonderful to go to different countries, and I highly encourage it because you really do get an eye opener on
Right.
a lot of things.
Yep, absolutely.
I'm a truck driver. I get to travel into the U.S. It's a blessing, and I'm very concerned for U.S. citizens as well as Canada, where I'm from.
Yep.
I really do appreciate you bringing up this stuff because this is starting to get very worrisome. This is, how should I say, problematic destruction. Not saying it's going to happen, but it could.
What could happen?
Well, like you were saying about education, we'll start off there. Education is something that everybody needs to have. Now, whether you're going public or private, again, unfortunate, that's kind of that invisible line. However, it's still a necessity. It's something that everybody has to have. It's not just something you can say yay or nay to. By stepping in more harder policies on education makes me want to say it's not helping your own people in the U.S. This is something that's not profitable for everyone.
Well, I go ahead.
Meaning that the people that can't afford that best education are going to suffer, as well as the people that are paying for it. It's going to hit you harder in the pocket. And this is not something that's going to disappear anytime soon.
Well, Beverly, there are two things here. First of all, I don't think that it will affect the quality of education. Okay, I mean, working in the schools, I see how hard our educators work, but in terms of, like, we're in the computer age, the funding of these schools would be my main concern. The quality of the educational piece in terms of, is everybody having the same advantage to advance in education? And we know that when states have control of that, we see a disparity in education numbers, which reflect in a disparity in test scores. And typically people who are socioeconomically disadvantaged typically come out on the bad end of that, or they don't fare as well. So for me, I do think education needs an overhaul. Okay?
Absolutely.
I do. But here's my thing. How about we see a plan that makes sense? Okay? I have no problem with.
I agree with you.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for calling in, Beverly, but that hits it right on the head. But we can't be fearful of it, but we do have to have these conversations, and we have to talk about it.
Absolutely.
And for people that
I'm glad
go ahead.
I'm very glad that you are opening that opportunity out for that feedback, because really and truly there is lots of citizens here that, yes, we may be pushing the panic button right now, but if we don't, like you said, where's that plan? And if there is one, why aren't they telling us what the plan is ahead of time?
Well, you know as well as I do, if he had a plan, it would have been rolled out by now. Okay?
There you go.
We had 4 years of this guy already, and he flew by the seat of his pants, and a lot of people were fine with that because a lot of people made money with him running the country the way that he ran it. So we were able to overlook some things. And that's great, but guess what? We don't have COVID now. We have some real
right.
life problems that we need to solve. And the new administration, he's got both the House and the Senate. Um, I'm hoping, and I said this my very first show in November. I hope that he does fabulous. I would love nothing better
Really, I do too.
than him to fix everything. I would be tickled pink. Okay, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to pay attention. I'm not going to bury my head in the sand and pretend like everything's going to be okay just because he says so. Because you know what? We're dealing with the government, right?
Amen.
And it's not just him. So I want to thank you for calling in, Beverly. Call in anytime. Thank you.
Thank
So, Beverly brings up an interesting point. I think it's great. First of all, Beverly's a trucker. So, she don't mess around. She gets right to the point. But this is exactly what I'm talking about. I'm rooting for the guy. I detest him as a person, but guess what? I live in the United States. I want us again to be the greatest country in the world, but great for all of us. I mean, great so that, I turned 60 last Wednesday, which means an actuary would say I got maybe 20 good years of me if I'm lucky. Okay? And when you get to be 60, you think a lot about legacy and your children, And a lot of what I think and a lot of things that I see, it's more about what are we leaving to our young people. And I see a lot of middle-aged people, middle-aged, by the way, is 60, according to me, out here espousing views that aren't going to help move the needle forward for the future of our children. Mass amounts of debt, the uncontrolled spending that we have. Somebody has to carry that burden. So again, like I said during the Biden administration, I love accountability. So I need people to use that same level of accountability that we had under the Biden administration. Let's have that with this current administration. Now, there's one piece that I want to talk about, and it's funny because his executive order reevaluating and realigning United States federal aid, foreign aid. Now, I've been on this piece since I was in college. And I was a political science major, and the one thing that I always said was, why are we giving money to people that don't like us, that don't support our agendas? It has always vexed me as to how we can send money around the world and not take care of our people at home first. And so the slogan, America First, is great, but I need more than that. So we're talking about reevaluating the money that we send to other people, to other countries. And so I'm like, well, that sounds fantastic. So during the Iraq War, Turkey refused to allow our planes to fly over their territory, okay? And they were supposed to be an ally. And this is just the example that I'm using because I remember that from school. And I thought, why are we giving them billions of dollars if they're not looking to advance what we want to accomplish? And I was told by someone who he worked in the State Department, and he said, we have to do these things because it's a strategic location, so we need to maintain any sort of structure or semblance that we can in that region. Now, I was in college in the 80s. That's almost, 30 years ago? Somewhere in there. Technology has changed and times have changed. And for me, I would like to see us restructure the money that's going overseas. The Ukraine, I'm sorry, but that, I don't even know how to describe the level of anger that I feel about the amount of money that we have spent in the Ukraine for one simple reason. Geographically, the Ukraine is located so close to the Soviet Union that the Soviet Union can't afford to lose that piece. So they're going to try to stick at that at all costs. Now, as Americans, I ask you, if the Soviets wanted to take Cuba, would we ever allow that? No, of course we wouldn't. That's just the geography of it. So knowing that, we need to come up with a better solution than what we're doing. But I do know this, if we had just taken half the money that we had spent in the Ukraine and we had used it for the citizens of the United States, infrastructure, education, homelessness, veterans, there are all these things that our government is not doing, right? Mr. Trump said, I got to call him President. President Trump says, hey, we're going to reevaluate. Okay, I'm all for that. Fantastic. But here's what I want to know. What are we going to do with all that newfound money? If we're saving $500 million by not going and fighting in these wars, where is that money going to end up then? Because I'll tell you what, during COVID, and I believe the last number was $4 billion is unaccounted for in COVID money. Now, unless I'm mistaken, COVID money is actually tax money. $4 billion unaccounted for. And look, now I'm giving you guys these numbers. They're off the top of my head, but honestly, do your own homework. I'm not saying that that is exactly the right number, but these are the things that we need to pay attention to. Okay? So that's one that's one of the executive orders that I'm like, hey, I hope he does do something. I hope we do bring money back in-house. So, you know, whereas I can't stand the guy as a human being, there are some things that he's saying that I get. There are other things that absolutely vex me. Big Game James says we're up against the break. When I come back, final thoughts on the executive orders, the new Trump administration, and what we should do as citizens of the United States. This is Jon Adams. If you want to call in, the phone number is 701-293-9000. Hey, welcome back to Talk of the Town with Jon Adams. I'm your host, Jon Adams. Just a little Jon Adams humor there. I thought I better lighten it up a little bit. So, last minute pardons. Let's talk about Joe Biden for a little bit because I thought it was interesting. He did something that made a lot of us stand up and cheer with his pardons, and no, it wasn't Hunter Biden. You know, I've said it before the rich and elite are going to do exactly what they want to do for their friends and family. It's back where I come from, it's called the hookup. And so, as we saw, there was a lot of hooking up going on. I suppose I can't say that because hooking up means something different than it used to.
You're going to corner yourself here.
But what I'm saying is, we do favors for friend and family, right? But I thought it was interesting that Obama didn't do something that I thought he should have done. Clinton didn't do it. Trump certainly didn't do it. But Joe Biden pardoned Leonard Peltier. And I found that absolutely amazing. Okay? And for those of you that don't know, Leonard Peltier was involved in a standoff with the FBI in the 60s on an Indian reservation. And depending on who you ask, he should be in jail forever. To those of us who have done our due diligence and look at the way the FBI conducted themselves, we know that in the 60s, COINTELPRO, J. Edgar Hoover, all of those agencies were corrupt and doing things that they shouldn't do. And in this instance, I don't know if you guys know this, but an Indian reservation is a sovereign nation unto itself, so they shouldn't have been there in the first place. That would be like us going into Mexico and trying to arrest some Mexican folks. Well, the FBI did that. They overstepped, and unfortunately, 2 FBI agents were killed. And despite the minimal amount of evidence, Leonard Peltier was sentenced to life in prison. So he's one of those guys, along with Nelson Mandela, that are iconic around the world, okay, for the way that the system has unjustly imprisoned people, okay? And as a matter of fact, Nelson Mandela, when he was released from prison, one of his immediate statements was to say that Leonard Peltier should also be released from prison. So that, to me, is a small victory, okay? Because we don't have heroes like that anymore, okay? You look at the 60s, the number of people that fought for all of the rights that everyone enjoys now, okay? More equal than it's ever been, as far as I'm concerned. You know, I'm a black man with a radio show. I don't think I'd be on the radio show in the 60s talking the way I'm talking, and if I was, it wouldn't be for long. But the point is, I wanted to acknowledge that Leonard Peltier is free, and along those lines, we lost a great one who was also involved with the American Indian movement, is Frank Perro. And when I heard that Leonard Peltier had been freed, there was a certain amount of sadness because Frank Perro was one of Leonard Peltier's friends. And I just wonder how he would have felt knowing that that had happened. You know, I would have loved to have had him on the show to be able to talk about what it means. And for people that say, what is this, blah, 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 whatever, just like people hold George Washington, you know, as the founding father of our nation. By the way, my son gave me a book on presidents, and I've been reading it. Very interesting read. But, you know, we also have our icons, okay? And so for me, Malcolm X, Louis Farrakhan, Martin Luther King, these are all gentlemen that I hold in high regard, despite the fact that they had some human flaws too. And so I look at Leonard Peltier and I think of our Native brothers and sisters, and I'm happy for them, you know? And I hope he lives long enough to have an impact on our Native communities, you know? So that these kids can see the living embodiment of greatness. We need that. And I've said, where are our heroes now? And contrary to popular belief, it ain't LeBron James, okay? Athletes, unless they genuinely put it on the line, should not be held in high regard. I don't see a Martin Luther King, I don't see a Muhammad Ali in the sports world. A guy who gave up everything for his beliefs. A very powerful figure, even in death. Where are all those heroes today? So whether you agree or disagree with me, I think Leonard Peltier is a hero to a lot of people. And whether you agree or not, you got to respect it. That guy put it on the line for his people. And for those of you hearing me, honestly, could you stand in the face of what you know could be certain death and stick up for people? I know our soldiers do it. But anyway, I just wanted to bring that up because that's a bright spot, you know? And as much as there were things that I don't get the Democrats, I don't get some of the things they do, why they did what they did, it vexes me. But I can tell you this much. I was proud of that moment. And that's part of being an American too. So with that, you know, I gave you guys a lot to chew on. You know, it is what it is. This is just one guy's opinions, but at the same time, we need to think about these things. We need to have dialogue, and we need to continue to talk about them. Next week, I'm hoping to have Coach Kramer from the NDSU Bison on, because why not? Why wouldn't we talk about an immense sense of pride, source of pride for us in the Fargo-Moorhead community? Okay? I'm going to give you those thoughts as well. I want everybody, hey, let's have a great week. And as always, stay black.